History doesn't stay buried. It comes back with old photos, forgotten footage, strange headlines, and a reminder that bad decisions used to wear better hats. This is Mason Zero's Living Archives. At 3:06 in the morning, Los Angeles started shooting at the sky. The photograph that survived makes the night look almost clean. White searchlights converging over the basin, bright bursts caught in the dark, a city aiming upward at one glowing patch of air. The lived version was messier. Not one warning shot. Not a couple nervous rounds. Searchlights crossed over Los Angeles like white ribs. Anti-aircraft guns opened from the coast. Shell bursts crawled through the dark. People stood in pajamas at windows they were supposed to keep blacked out, watching a sky that seemed to be inventing new shapes every few seconds. Some witnesses swore they saw planes. Some saw lights. One air raid warden thought he saw a big bag, something like a balloon, being torn up by gunfire and drifting down. And the strangest part is not that Los Angeles was scared. The strangest part is how reasonable the fear felt at the time. The United States had been at war for less than 3 months. Pearl Harbor was still close enough to feel like yesterday. Then, on February 23, 1942, a Japanese submarine surfaced near the Elwood oil field outside Santa Barbara and fired shells toward the coast. The attack did not do much damage. But it did something stronger than damage. It proved the Pacific War could touch California. So by February 24, 1942, Southern California was not just sunshine and movie studios. It was aircraft plants, shipyards, and sandbags. It was searchlight crews, blackout curtains, wardens, rumors, and people trying very hard not to look frightened. That evening, naval intelligence warned that an attack might come within 10 hours. Flares and blinking lights were reported near defense plants. At 7:18 that evening, the alert went out. A few hours later, it was lifted. The city breathed out, which is usually when history taps the glass again. A little after 2 in the morning, radar picked up a target about 120 miles west of Los Angeles. Anti-aircraft batteries were alerted. The target came toward the coast. Then, near the shoreline, it vanished from the radar picture. That is a terrible kind of information, enough to scare everyone, not enough to explain anything. At 2:21, the blackout order went out. Los Angeles disappeared by instruction. Streetlights died. Windows went dark. Cars crept through blacked-out roads. The city became a place of voices, engines, sirens, and people staring upward into a sky they could barely see. The Army Air Forces kept pursuit planes on the ground. That sounds strange afterward, but in the moment, the defenders did not know the size, direction, or identity of the threat. Sending fighters into a blacked-out, shell-filled sky could have made the night even worse. Then the reports started piling up. At 2:43, planes were reported near Long Beach. A Coast Artillery colonel reported about 25 planes at 12,000 feet. Other calls put objects near Santa Monica. Lights were seen offshore. Something was said to be moving slowly. Something else was said to be moving fast. The story was no longer one target. It was a sky full of possible targets. Now imagine being on a gun crew in that moment. You do not have the luxury of waiting for the footnotes. You have Pearl Harbor in your memory, Santa Barbara in yesterday's newspaper, radar trouble offshore, a blacked-out city behind you, and someone in command saying the coast may be under attack. At 3:06, a balloon carrying a red flare was reported over Santa Monica. 4 batteries opened fire. Then everyone else heard it. The official history says the air over Los Angeles erupted like a volcano. That is not a delicate phrase. That is what it must have sounded like. Guns hammering, shells bursting, sirens moving through the dark, searchlights trying to pin the night to the wall. The newspapers did what newspapers do when the world gets weird. They made it loud enough to fold in half and throw onto a porch. Guns blocked planes. Shrapnel fell. The coast went black. Unidentified craft hovered, crossed, fled, returned, or refused to be counted, depending on which report arrived first. Here, the story stops being only a mystery about what was in the sky. It becomes a story about what a city can do to its own senses. Once the firing started, the sky became almost impossible to read. Searchlights caught smoke. Shell bursts made bright spots. More guns fired at the bright spots. Smoke drifted, beams crossed, fragments flashed, and every flash became a clue. Every clue became a target. Every target became proof that the next round was necessary. Some observers reported one plane. Some reported a formation. Some reported dozens. Some reports went higher than that. Speeds changed, altitudes changed, directions changed. One slow object could become many objects after enough light, smoke, noise, and fear got involved. That was when the whole city became a very expensive guess. By the time the firing stopped, roughly 440 anti-aircraft rounds had gone into the air. No bombs had fallen. No enemy aircraft had been confirmed. No wreckage lay in the streets proving what everyone had been shooting at. No American fighters had gone up to identify the target. Morning did not make it simpler. It made the questions easier to read. Los Angeles had broken windows, damaged roofs, shell fragments, traffic accidents, and civilians dead in the panic around the alarm. It also had rumors, which are one of history's most renewable resources. Planes had been shot down. Planes had landed in Hollywood. Enemy agents had been signaling from the hills. Pick your breakfast panic. Navy Secretary Frank Knox called it a false alarm. The Army was not ready to say that. Secretary of War Henry Stimson said reports suggested 1 to 5 aircraft may have been over Los Angeles. Maybe commercial planes flown by enemy agents. Maybe planes launched from submarines. The explanation kept changing clothes while everyone was still looking at it. Local officials and newspapers demanded answers. Which is fair. If nothing was there, why had the city fired for so long? If something was there, why did no one shoot it down? And if the threat was real enough for guns, why were fighters kept on the ground? That gap is where the legend took root. After the war, Japanese officials said they had not sent aircraft over Los Angeles that night. The calmer explanation pointed toward weather balloons, flares, smoke, shell bursts, confused reports, and a defensive system that was very new at being ready. None of that is as exciting as a secret raid. It is just more believable, which is root of history but fairly common. That does not mean everyone who looked up that night was foolish. It means they were living inside the first months of a war that had already made the impossible feel scheduled. A radar return, a warning, a flare, a column of smoke, and a few bright shell bursts were enough to turn the sky into a courtroom where fear kept testifying. The Battle of Los Angeles is a funny name because no battle, in the normal sense, was ever found. But a city did fight something that night. It fought a radar blip. It fought a warning. It fought yesterday's submarine shells and tomorrow's imagined bombers. It fought the awful pressure of not knowing whether caution was panic or survival. And maybe that is why the photo lasts. Those searchlights crossing above Los Angeles, aimed at one bright place in the sky. It looks like proof of something. It is proof of something. Just maybe not the thing people wanted it to be. It is proof that fear can become visible. And once it does, even a whole city can start firing at a shape it cannot quite name. Until next time, remember that history is mostly ordinary people doing ordinary things right before the consequences arrive. The past was not wiser, just less recently embarrassed. Thanks for watching.